Thank you all for joining us for Media for After School 101. We are so excited today to have Susan Pedo, an Albany-based media consultant, join us to talk to us about all of the ways that you can, with really minimal effort, really have a high impact on the media landscape in New York, promote both your own program and after school more generally. Susan was the media consultant that we were lucky enough to work with during the budget season this year, thanks to a very generous grant from the Bound Foundation. She came to us with a tremendous amount of experience. She started her career in the New York State Senate, where she served as the Director of Communications. She then went on to the Albany County Executive's Office, where she was the Director of Communications for 4 years, moved there to being the Director of Economic Development, went on to serve at Family Planning Advocates as a Vice President for Advocacy and eventually acting CEO for 7 years. And as a private consultant, has been doing wonderful work in the education space, including with the PTAs, for a number of years. And as I said, we were incredibly lucky to get to work with her. She was a total joy. And if you saw a huge uptick in the media work that NYSAN was doing, that's all pretty much owed to Susan. So we're very excited to have her today talking to us about Media 101. The structure is going to be that we will take questions in the chat box at any time. We will then have plenty of time at the end for questions, and there may be a couple of opportunities in the session where Susan might specifically ask for feedback as well. If you have any technical challenges, please do email us through the chat box, and we'll be happy to help out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan, and thank you all so much for joining us.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be able to talk to you en masse about media for the After School Network. We did this in a rather compressed time span when we were working on the budget issues earlier this year with Nora, and many of you, thank you for your help as we sought to direct attention to this issue on the many issues that are part of the New York State budget process. We did have quite a bit of success in placing articles, letters to the editor, and editorial pieces, and I think plan in advance now, working with you a little bit more earlier on some of the issues that can be developed for after school, so that by the time you're looking at budget issues next year and other timely events that may coincide with the legislative calendar, you'll be ready, and you will also have already built up a number of articles and letters to the editor, as well as broadcast pieces that will have started to form a base for your media work for next year and beyond. We'll start right off with a poll. If I could real quickly take this very brief poll, let us know if you are an executive director, program director, site coordinator, staff member, parent, or other, so that we know who's on call. That would be very helpful. And I move right on from this while you are filling that in to a little bit of background on the mission of NYSAN. Nora, did you want to review this real quick?
I know most of you know us, but it's always helpful to have folks, in case we've got anyone new on the line. So NYSAN is the New York State After School Network. We are a statewide public-private partnership that brings together the different stakeholders across the state who are really committed to promoting young people's safety, learning, and healthy development outside the traditional classroom. When we use the term after school, we define that very broadly. We're talking about summer, extended learning time, weekend programs, before school, any of the different ways that we reach youth outside the traditional school day. So forgive the shorthand, we'll stick with after school for now, but feel free to think broadly about all the different ways that you impact the lives of youth in your communities.
And we'll go to a second quick poll, and if you could please let us know if you've ever written a letter to the editor, a media advisory, a press release, a radio interview, TV interview, or a newspaper interview. And if you could click all of those that apply will give us a good indication of the level of media involvement that we're dealing with today, and we can help to spend a little more time on some of those pieces where people would like a little bit more support. And you'll be able to see that screen, I think, while we advance to our agenda for today, which will be to review some of the major efforts that made in the last media build-up to the budget, New York State budget, as well as some other skills that we hope to develop as we continue to expand the media awareness of after school. We'll start letters to the editor. We will move on to media releases and media advisory, and then we'll do a quick session on interview skills. And that is obviously an area where you could spend hours or even days learning and practicing skills for either print or broadcast interviews. But a very quick review will give you the basics that you need to know when you are called on to do an interview with a reporter. So start off with letters to the editor. We'd like to show you a letter to the editor that was published during the budget work that we did. And we'll just take 15 seconds, please, to read this letter real quick. Okay, that's 15 seconds. Most of you probably didn't get all the way through reading this letter. The reason that we use 15 seconds is that is actually more time than most people will spend reading a letter to the editor in the newspaper. So it emphasizes one of the points that we're going to review in just a moment, which is keeping your letter very much to the point and getting your main point and main message into the first paragraph. Newspapers have extended obviously well beyond their print version, so not as important to get your letter into the print version, but also onto the online version of a newspaper. This is your topic more relevant, especially if people are doing Google searches on particular issues and reviewing their newspaper and news media consumption online, as more and more people are doing these days. 2008, people would spend up to 30 minutes with a newspaper. In 2012, it went down to about 21 minutes with an actual newspaper, and the projected for 2018 is 16 minutes on the entire paper. You can envision that if a person who was spending 16 minutes reading a newspaper online or a hard copy spent a quarter of their time reading letters to the editor, that would leave them 4 minutes to review all of the letters to the editor and editorials that are published in the paper. Means that most people are doing a quick scan of the headlines and the first paragraph, which makes those two pieces of a letter to the editor especially important. So we've had a chance to look over some of the rest of this letter done and edited by Nancy Lamarca of Rotterdam and published in the Daily Gazette. It was a very effective letter, and we'll have a look to parse exactly what made this a good letter to the editor, and a few things that you should keep in mind when you are composing these types of pieces. The thing is that it conforms to the standards of the newspaper, which are the specs that every newspaper has for their letter to the editor, their editorial publications, and any other types of pieces that you would submit to be published under your name in a newspaper. Those newspapers now have these specs online. They will give you the word length. They will give you the requirements they have for additional information, which includes your name, usually includes your email address, phone number, and including your city. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to publish those pieces of personal information, but they do need a way to verify that you have actually submitted the letter that is being published under your name. It's very, very important to follow the specs that a newspaper has put out, which I would like to spend 1 minute right now to open a tab and do a quick Google search of a newspaper that you might propose a letter to the editor for. You've already a media source that is in context and you know what their specs are, please think of another one that you might use. Maybe if you primarily use a local newspaper, maybe you'd like to use one that's a little more regional. Look up the New York Times. You might have something of that sort that would rise to that level of importance. Look up a weekly newspaper. Weekly newspapers are very effective for getting local messages out. So right now, if you could please take 60 seconds to look up the specs for a newspaper. Start with your Google term of the newspaper's name and insert letters to the editor. And word count is another good word to use in your search, or specs would work well. Bookmark that once you find it. And if you're having trouble finding it at the end of the minute that we're doing this little exercise on, please send us a message either via chat or give a call or an email after this presentation, and we will help you to research it. The important thing to keep in mind as you are formulating your letters, because if you have a very short word count, as more and more of the newspapers paring back their size, you may have to make your message much more compact than you anticipated. Let's give you that. While in your search, I would call your attention to the page that contains the specs for submission to publications. Will probably also contain specs not only for letters to the editor, but also editorial submissions. Generally, letters to the editor are shorter pieces that a newspaper may publish between 4 and 8 on any given day within their letters to the editor section. An editorial submission is generally a longer piece, and usually newspapers only will publish 1 or 2 of those in a regular weekday paper. Now, for both of these, letters to the editors and editorial publications have a much greater chance of being published online, even if your submission is not published in the print version. So if you see your submission published in the regular paper, check online before you give a call to the newspaper to follow up to make sure that they received it. And in that same vein, I would also caution you when you are getting your identifying information, which includes your address, your email address, and your phone number, specify when you send that into the newspaper that any information that you want to ensure is kept private is for their confidential use only. There are some newspapers and some online sites that will publish a person's email address unless they ask not to, and most of us would prefer not to do that. Some may be open to receiving email, and there may even be an advantage to you to have your email address published. But I would caution you to consider that first and to specify what your preferences are when you are making a submission. Somebody was able to find their sections for letter to the editor in their local newspaper or a new source that you would be using. A couple other pieces that we want to review going back to the slide that is currently up are the importance of getting to the point in the first sentence or paragraph of your letter to the editor or your editorial submission. Do not generally read the entire piece of a letter to the editor unless they have a personal interest or use for the story or topic, but most will scan the headlines and read through a couple of sentences in an editorial section. So you want to ensure that your point is your first paragraph, preferably even your first sentence, and that's very clearly made. In the mission that we have on your screen, you'll note that that sentence is right in the second sentence, which is all children in New York should have the same opportunity, and I support plan in this year's state budget for $160 million in new after-school programs. So it's very clearly and cleanly stated, and as a bonus in her first paragraph, she has also indicated that this is going to be something of a personal letter and that she has a personal stake in this, and also indicated there is a local interest. That third point of what makes a good letter to the editor, which is a personal or local account or point of view. And was very helpful to you in getting letter editor published. The local editors of newspapers are very interested in ensuring that they are covering the local news from a community and neighborhood point of view very well. People are more and more to local news, and you'll notice that a lot of your news stations and broadcast media are emphasizing that word local over the past several years because the media market has become so specialized now. So local is very important. There are times when a broader viewpoint will be taken and considered, especially when we're dealing with state budget issues, for example, where a more holistic approach is needed and used, but the local person presenting their local point of view always has the advantage of getting a piece published. The next point is on short sentences and paragraphs. Always, when you write a letter to the editor, before you submit, go back and give it a good read and review. Check out any extraneous words or sentences that do not support your point that you made in your first sentence or paragraph, which is really the message that you want people to get from a letter to the editor. Always a good idea to have a second set of eyes as well, reviewing and editing your work. An excellent person to do that is Nora Sally at NYSAN. It's not only will that you a really good grammatical review and a message review, but it also enables them to make sure that everyone is delivering a consistent message. They've been doing a really good job of developing message points so that everyone is consistent in the public presentations that you have been giving. And that's especially important during the budget time and somewhat challenging because the way that people perceive and talk about after-school programs is very diverse throughout New York State. And Nora was very, very careful when she was giving media interviews and sending letters to the editor and writing editorials to a consistent message as well as very consistent specific words. So whenever you have the opportunity to use that same language, it reinforces your message so that more people can understand the import of the points that you're trying to make. Finally, talked about including a personal or local story or point of view. Again, personal story is always always to generate interest for a letter to the editor, and that is especially effective when you can have your parents writing letters, and they can really, when they're talking about their own children, make a really heartfelt case for your cause. to the next slide. This is another letter to the editor that was published in the Journal News during budget season. You will note some of the points that we just talked about. We have short sentences. We have the most important point being covered in the very first sentence. This letter was published shortly after we received the news that the state Senate was not fully supporting the amount of funding that the governor had proposed. And so it is right there in the very first sentence. The state's failure to commit to new funding for high-quality after-school programs is a real loss. And then the second sentence turns the whole thing a little more on a positive note and lets us know what we need to do to ensure that those services can continue to be covered. So the letter conforms to all of the standards that Journal News required for word count, include the name and contact information for Sonia, who submitted this letter. A little bit more and kind of a wrap up on how to submit your letter to the editor. Well, as you looked on, you know that the paper's website will have directions, usually under contact, and sometime on the letter to the editor or opinion page. You can submit your letter to the editor in the body of an email, and not necessarily only as an attachment, because just when you are going through your emails quickly, perhaps on your smartphone, you can't see the body of the text, then is just another step, another click that you have to make to get to read what you want. Letter editor are short enough that everyone's smartphone can handle that amount of text pretty easily. So include it in the body. If you want to include it as an attachment as well, that's fine, but make sure it's in the body of the email. Remember to include your full name, title, home address, phone, and email. Generally, those are not published. If you do not want to ensure that they will not be published, I would strongly recommend including a disclaimer that says this information is for verification purposes only. Paper will call you to verify that you wrote it and letting you know if they are going to publish it. If it is a topic in which they're particularly interested in, they actually ask you to expand your to the editor to an editorial. At that point in time, you would have a new word count, you would have the opportunity to expand on the points that you made, and have a little more prominent placement in the newspaper piece. If you get to that point, I would urge you to immediately contact Nora to let her know that this is happening, so that if anything else is happening on a state level that have made the topic that you were addressing more important, you need to know what else is going on, especially during budget time and end of session. Things change very quickly, and there may have been a new development that you may not be aware of. You want to make sure that you're all using the same messaging and the same language as you are discussing these issues, so that you can point and that legislators across the state will understand what you're talking about. If you are to take a look to the editor out of your newspaper, that you submit and bring it to your legislator on a day that she's doing a visit. So keep in good contact with your association and make sure that your messaging is consistent. If you're having any trouble submitting it, of course, contact NYSAN as well, and they can be very helpful in that regard. So we come to media advisories and press releases. We have samples of both of these vehicles, and we will start with a media advisory. This is an advisory that was used for a press conference on after-school and after-school programs, also towards the end of the budget and legislative process in Buffalo. The use for a media advisory as opposed to a media release. The media advisory generally describes an event that is coming out. It's usually sent out a day or two before the event, so the editors get it in their planning schedules. And then a good idea is to send it out the morning of the event as well, so that if something has changed or a little reminder is needed or a new editor is on the desk of the day of your event, and set of eyes has the opportunity to see it, review it, and include it in the schedule for their reporters. The thing to include in a media advisory, the date, time, location, and agenda as set out in the second paragraph of the media advisory that you're looking at on your screen. You have to have a very, very clear presentation of the date and time so people know to go. Also let them know, as this does at the end of the first paragraph, there are additional opportunities outside of the time that you've listed, or there's a specific speaker at a particular time. This event is held from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. Now, that's a long time for a reporter to come and spend at an event. Rarely does a reporter and or a photographer actually have the luxury of spending 5 hours at one event. So the release at the end of the first paragraph specifies media availability with the mayors and other leaders in attendance will be held from 9:40 to 9:50 a.m. So this gives reporters the opportunity to come in and get a statement from some people who are going to be participating in this event before it actually happens. Now, that's good for a few reasons, and this one in particular, if they were to get on a local news, perhaps with a live shot, or would even have time here to get on the noon news if the report included this early package, so they could actually help to bring in the public to their event if that is their intention, since the event goes till 3 o'clock. So consider those timing issues when you're planning your event and put media advisory out. This media also has location very clearly specified, and in case that you can get more information from the agenda online with the link to that opportunity. Advisory is often complemented by a press release, which can be released on a day, and we'll talk a little more about that in just a second. So what media advisory that we just got? Strong media advisory. Looking at the points that we've outlined on the left side of your screen, it has complete public information. The contact for this, David Doyle, right at the top underneath the headline, giving both his phone number and email address. And I do strongly suggest that you use email addresses and, if possible, a cell phone number, so as more and more reporters are texting now for quick information, or if they're going to be a little late and want to make sure that they can still interview the mayor if they show up at 12:15, they should be able to get to you quickly. So be sure that the person that's used as a contact is available before and during that media event, so that the reporters can connect with you as they need to. It also newsworthy headline. New York State mayors to highlight after-school and summer programs at Western New York Summit. So this is a reflection of the budget work that was done. There was a lot of media leading up to that gained the awareness of reporters and the public, and they were able to utilize the after-school impact and influence that they had developed to actually generate some interest in the summit that they were holding. The first paragraph gets right to the point by telling you who is going to be there and what the topic is. And media advisories generally do not include quotes, but those will be included in the press release that you might issue of the event or immediately after an event. This advisory has local appeal for folks in Buffalo and Western New York, and it's very important, and NYSAN has been very good at this, is that it's coordinated in advance with partners. Are doing an event like this, you want to make sure that all your partners and administrators are well aware that this is going on. The thing that you would not want is a reporter to leave your event excited and enthusiastic with the information that you've given them, and then they call your state office for a quote on a particular program you talked about, and the report out that the state office has no idea that one of its affiliates did not was using a particular program and could not support concept. Of course, it happens in our day-to-day lives all the time. We are moving fast, and there's a lot of different programs that we avail ourselves of, but coordination of these programs as you're doing the event is really, really essential. I mean, we know it happens in day-to-day life, but when you have one opportunity to present this to the public, you want to make sure that all of your supporters and partners are on board. Okay, this is a press release that was also used during the budget season. It is one that may look familiar to some of you because we issued it in a format that we hoped that several of you could take advantage of, and many of you did. It talked about the opportunities for students and the importance of programs during winter break, just before winter break started. So this gave a timely and local perspective on the state budget work that Nora was working on at that time. We discussed it has a quote that you used from your state office supporting the work we're doing, and the opportunity for you also to include a local quote. So if we look at what a good media release, it can again include a complete public contact information with Nora's name, her number, a cell number, and her email address. It a newsread line, winter break was the hook that we tried to use, which was very late because winter break was actually upon us when this was issued, and linked that to the state budget situation. The first gets directly to the point and telling about the importance of winter break for many school children and their families, and what the situation was at the state level, and included quotes that could be included in the article if a reporter did not have time to call and speak to you or to Nora directly, or if they had a situation, and this does happen, where news are looking to fill space. This press release really could have stood on its own as a complete article, and it happened many that, especially with weekly and smaller newspapers, a press release will be taken in its entirety and published, especially in the online version of a paper, virtually word for word. So you want to make sure you have a usable piece when you send out with that sort of local appeal and quotes that support it, so it could appear as if it were an article that were written if needed. This was all coordinated with all of you and the state office. Your media advisory or press release. There's a couple of tips for this to try to ensure your best opportunity for publication. You identify any reporters who have written stories on similar topics, and you can research that using Google. Insert the name of the newspaper that you're interested in and the topic, getting as specific as you can, and then look up those articles and see who the reporter actually was who's covering it. Often you'll find that a reporter may have done several stories on that topic. If you can give them some supporting information on another aspect they haven't considered, not only could that get you an article that would be published at the time, but it also helps to build you as a source for future stories that the reporter will consider. Just as we did with letters to the editor, you want to send your submission in the body of an email as well as an attachment. Include the full name, title, phone number, and email of the contact person. Make sure that contact person is ready to respond to any questions. You need to make sure that they are available throughout the event. If we're talking about a media advisory or any other sort of even a media release, that would be going out. So don't give contact information for a person who's leaving on vacation. Don't give out contact information for a person who will be administrating an event and not checking their phone throughout the time of the event because you could miss important media opportunities. The idea to attach a photo if possible. Photos are also being published now, not only by newspapers, but on many online sites. So be sure if you are doing that you have the proper permissions from the people who are included in the photos. And again, and coordinate with NYSAN to make sure that you're all on the same page and that you aren't both contacting the same reporters or media. Our lesson on interview skills, and we'll get to some questions from you. So if called for a reporter, and especially at a time when you weren't expecting it, doesn't mean that it'll only be called when you send out your fabulous press release or response to your fantastic media advisory. You may be called out of the blue, and reporters may start firing questions at you about a situation that you aren't even aware of. Of course, your instinct, especially in the profession that you're in, is to try to help people, try to get them the information that they want as soon as you can. There's a great danger in doing that on the phone, and I would always advise you when you're contacted by a reporter to first find out from them what the area is about, what their deadline is. Take your time to prepare for interview that you have to do. Take a step back and also let the reporter know, if possible, when you will be responding to them. If you can call them back even in 15 minutes to give yourself a little time to get organized, to maybe take touch base with the state office to see if there are new developments on that topic, and possibly even to check internally to see if there's something locally that's happened that will help you a great deal. As you're taking this time to prepare your interview, I'd strongly suggest that you write down your message if you're doing an interview over the phone. Take the minute to write down, first of all, your message. Just be contacted by the media for an interview does not mean that you don't have the opportunity to utilize that for your messaging and for your purposes as well. Write down the statement that you want to make sure is part of the article or the story that the reporter is doing. Beneath that, write down a couple of main points with supporting information or examples that show that your message is valid. Now, should you make sure to include and incorporate this message into answers that you give to the reporter, but you should do that multiple times. Again, you can feel free to repeat those main sentences and ideas and phrases that you utilize, and go back to your past media releases, media advisory, things that have been prepared by your state to make sure that you are utilizing the same language and talking points that have been generated for your association. When you're getting a radio interview in particular, I want to make sure to use short sentences. Slow down your speech and get one thought into one sentence to the extent possible. Camera, you want to make sure that you ask the reporter or camera person where to focus if they tell you. You'll notice when you're watching the news and a person is being interviewed that oftentimes they are looking around. It makes you look very shifty. It does not make you look like a dependable source. So it's well in your realm to ask the reporter, where would you like me to look? Sometimes the reporter will be talking to you off camera. Sometimes the reporter will have the camera on their shoulder, and they will say, you can me. So a reporter will have a camera person with them. The camera person will be off the side. So as you're talking to the reporter, you're actually looking off camera. That is completely dependent on the type of package that the reporter is putting together. It may complement a previous style that they've used in an earlier interview, or may actually be cutting back to themselves and some other investigation that they've done sooner. So somewhere that you should focus and stay focused on that so that your attention is where it should be when the piece is produced. All types of interviews, print, broadcast, quotes that might be used online or on video, always keep in mind that absolutely nothing you say is off the record. No matter what you're told by a reporter, anything that you say can still be used. And it's not always anybody's fault. Reporters are very busy. They are often trying to produce many stories in a single day. They're taking notes as best as they can, online or on paper if they're actually at an event. It's very hard for them to go through and to write a statement and exactly when they were allowed to use a piece of information and when they weren't. So the best idea for you is to only speak to reporters about information that you would not publish. The gold is on the front page of the New York Times. It'll definitely benefit you and your organization. And while you should be as helpful and accurate as can in an interview, if you aren't sure of something, don't ever make it up or try to reach for facts that you aren't certain of. Offer to get back to the reporter, and they will greatly appreciate your honesty and your follow-up. And remember to stay on message and have that message coordinated with your state office and other partners. And those are the three pieces that we wanted to cover in this hour. So if anyone has any questions at this point in time about letters to the editor, media advisories and media releases, or about interview skills, please let us know and we can discuss those now.
Folks are adding their questions in the chat box so that Susan can take a look. I did want to point out the calendar that we had put together. I know many of you have seen in your email, trying to coordinate our advocacy efforts over the next few months so that, as Susan stressed, we can all be on message together. June's theme is going to be end-of-year events. So this is a perfect opportunity to practice your media advisories and press releases. Really, I know many of you are going to be doing amazing performances, showcases, talent shows, parent nights, all kinds of things. It's a great opportunity to reach out to the media, start building those relationships, and practice again how you can get that information out to the public. So Sorry, it's not. Hang on just a second. Susan, can you click on that 2015-16 budget tab?
Did you see that?
Yes, everyone else can. Sorry, apologies. I could see it on mine, and I didn't realize everyone else couldn't. So, Susan, I will turn back over to you. I should not have been messing. I should just have let you take over on that one.
The calendar that NYSAN has put together is very helpful in, again, keeping the themes consistent. Most people retain information best if they hear it repeated during a short period of time. So this is a very good idea by your state office to try to keep everybody generating attention and public awareness on particular themes, while letting you have the flexibility to operate within that entire month, utilizing some of these ideas. The themes for this month were local leadership, and you had a couple of opportunities that were suggested for utilizing that theme. And Local Leadership Summit on May 12th was an opportunity to highlight and thank local leaders who attend. So it was a great letter to the editor, not only mentioning and highlighting your event, but also showing the importance of your organization in pointing out that local elected officials and leaders have participated in it. Add please to June's theme, which is the end of the year, another great opportunity to invite legislators and media to your event, and to look for media stories on your program's graduates and other outcomes. So look for those success stories, look for those human interest opportunities, and generate a press release on it. You have a particular event, maybe an award that one of your students is receiving, or that one of your volunteers will be getting, or it recognizes the involvement of a local legislator or leader that makes an excellent media advisory in which you use the format that you saw earlier to outline date, time, and place of your event, who will be there, what will be happening, and what the media's opportunities are to attend and participate and cover that event. Open to questions again.
Arzen, we got a couple of questions. The first one is, what sort of stories are particularly interesting to local journalists?
So the stories that are particularly interesting to local journalists are scam stories. So if you haven't had a murder lately, if you haven't had any impropriety or cheating or any of that sort going on at your program, you should be proud of that. However, it makes things a little more difficult to garner media attention. So some ways you can be glad that you're going to work a little extra hard to get media attention for your programs because you're doing such a good job, and you are a dependable source, though, for information about after-school programs. The topics that are listed in the calendar are especially interesting and try to coincide timely events in your program. You have summer sessions coming up, though. That is a great opportunity, again, to highlight how your program is consistent with the needs of your community. On another event, unfortunate event, the media has been covering a great deal of late is when and drug problems that have been escalating throughout the state. We also have a lot of legislative action on that topic right now, and you will probably be hearing a good deal more, if you haven't already, from the state office on how to emphasize the parts of your programs that you have probably been doing on drug use prevention for years that now coincide with a legislative emphasis on this topic as well.
Thanks. I also have the question, how can programs get students and their parents involved?
We already have a lot of programs that get students and parents involved. Taking to the next level and get to become involved at a media level is a bit more of a challenge, obviously. Develop the skills that we just discussed in the last hour. It may take a sit down with someone who has expressed particular appreciation for a story or for some work that you've done with their students. Oftentimes people may be so impressed and so grateful for what you've done that they may ask you, what can I do? Or I'm glad to volunteer, or how can I help? Those are people who obviously are especially safe to develop the media work with. And it make sitting down with them and showing them online how to Google their local newspaper and showing them how to submit a letter to the editor if that is something that they would be interested in doing. Many of the letters to the editor can be submitted directly online right within the newspaper's website. So if that's the case, you could sit them down and invite them to right there on site and submit it from a computer at your office. Also, hopefully, give you the opportunity to review it with them so that you can ensure that they're using the correct name of your program. The title is properly identified, that if they're thanking one person in particular, that person's name is spelled correctly. But you really do need to look for those opportunities and those individuals who are ready and willing to do this type of work. Because, we've just spent a full hour on it ourselves, and most people who you're interacting with on a programmatic basis and are coming and going rather quickly don't really have that type of time. So it's definitely worth the work and effort, though, that you'll put in the benefits that you'll see throughout the community.
Let's see. I had a question about if the webinar is being recorded, and I can answer that. Yes, it is being recorded, and we will have this posted on the NYSAN website so that you can share it and review it again as needed. And then I got, what is the easiest place for people who are nervous about writing to start?
An excellent question. The easiest place is right at your desk. Open up a Word document, look at the examples that you have put into the webinar. We didn't put them there because we expect you to read every single word while we were on this webinar, but we wanted them to be there so that you have some good, solid examples of really good letters to the editor and press releases when you go back to do this work yourself. So use those tools and of the tips that we talked about and just start writing. Maybe get your most important point in your first paragraph. That you're looking at the word count and keeping your message as consistent as possible. And then if it's your very first time, send that to Nora and tell her what you're thinking about and what newspaper you'd like to submit it to, and she will give you great feedback on writing. If you are going to do your very first interview, a media interview, either on the radio or on television or a cable news station, the best place to practice that is in front of the mirror. Get yourself in front of the mirror and say the words out loud. Listen to yourself talk and see if the messaging that you have been thinking through in your mind is really does trip off your tongue. If they are words that you're comfortable saying and a message that seems to be coming together, then you are probably in pretty good shape for your interview. If things are not feeling comfortable as you're giving this interview in front of the mirror, then you probably need to do a little more work and go back to write down those messaging points that we talked about, with first highlighting your main message point and developing supporting material for that point in short sentences, in understandable phrases, and pull that message together so that it is clear and understandable.
Okay, so I think that was the end of our questions, unless anyone has anything further, but it looks like not. So thank you so much, Susan. Look at us coming in exactly on time. This is the way I like to run our events. I am so grateful for your wisdom and expertise, as well as your help for NYSAN over the course of the budget season. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. I think we will probably all be looking to your examples. Susan was very modest about how much of that work that you are admiring. She was very instrumental in making happen. And we really do appreciate you walking us through a number of the, again, very daunting but also exciting ways that after-school programs really can take on this media challenge. For anyone who has follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Allie or myself. We are really excited about the media work that we're doing and that we are hoping many of you are going to continue to do now that you've gotten started, and we are happy to help you anytime. Any last words of wisdom, Susan?
Start at the beginning. Sit down at your desk and start to think about topics that you might want to consider writing even over the next week or two. Summer presents a great opportunity to develop these ideas and work with your office to make sure that you're getting your messages out. You've got a great subject and very publishable with really local angles. I hope you'll take full advantage of those and spread your message throughout your community and your state.
I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.